If your family has ever made you feel like the supporting character in your own life, stay. Because this is for you. The night I won the biggest award of my career, I sat alone on the edge of a hotel bed in a navy dress and cried into my hands for 20 minutes. Not because I was sad, because I finally understood something I had been refusing to understand for 36 years. And once you understand it, you cannot ununderstand it. You cannot go back to pretending. You cannot keep performing gratitude for a family that has been performing love. Here is what happened. I am a teacher, AP Literature, Westbrook Academy, Illinois. I have spent 15 years in that classroom. 14 of my students have gone to Ivy League schools. 3 have published novels. 1 just won a Pulitzer Prize, and she mailed me a handwritten letter thanking me for the red pen marks I left in the margins of her very first short story when she was 17 years old. She remembered. My own family never does. Last April, I won the Illinois Educator of the Year award, state level, a ceremony at the Capitol in Springfield. I wore a navy dress. I stood at a podium and shook the superintendent's hand while a room full of strangers applauded for 90 seconds. I had reserved 2 seats in the 3rd row, 1 for my mother, 1 for my father. They didn't come. My sister's daughter had a piano recital the same weekend. Little hands on the keys. More important than 36 years of their daughter doing everything right and being seen by everyone except them. My mother texted me at 11:30 that night. Congrats, honey. So proud. And then a photograph. My niece at her piano recital. Little hands perfectly positioned on the ivory keys. My sister's daughter. My sister's event. My sister, always, in the center of everything. I read that text 3 times. Then I put the phone face down on the nightstand, sat on the edge of the bed in that navy dress, and understood with a clarity I had been running from my entire life that this was not an accident. This was not forgetfulness. This was the pattern. It had always been the pattern. And I had spent 3 decades making excuses for it, shrinking myself to accommodate it, achieving extraordinary things in rooms my family could not be bothered to enter. That was the night I stopped, not with a slammed door, not with a screamed accusation, just a woman in a navy dress, very still. Finally done waiting. My name is Serena Calloway. I am 36 years old. I teach AP Literature at Westbrook Academy in Illinois. I want to tell you about the box under my bed. It is a brown shoebox, the kind that comes with winter boots. Inside it are every birthday card I ever sent my family over the course of 15 years. All of them returned to sender. Not because they were lost, because in 15 years of moving apartments across 2 cities, my parents never once updated my address in their contacts. I kept sending cards anyway, every birthday, every holiday, every occasion. I kept sending them because I needed to believe that the gesture mattered even when it wasn't received, that I was still the kind of daughter who showed up even if showing up was invisible. The box holds 43 cards, each one stamped return to sender in red ink, each one still sealed because they came back before anyone opened them. I have never thrown them away. I think I kept them because they were proof, not of my love for them, but of theirs for me, or rather, the precise shape of its absence. I have a sister named Vivienne. Even the name sounds like a chandelier, like something meant to be admired from a distance, in a room you were never quite invited into. Vivienne is 39. She married well, in my mother's words. Her husband, Carter, comes from old money. They live in a stone house in Lake Forest with a circular driveway and a garden that gets photographed for local magazines. Vivienne doesn't work. She volunteers. She chairs fundraising committees. She hosts dinner parties where the linens are pressed, the conversation is curated, and everything is, always and without exception, perfect. My mother calls her every morning at 8 o'clock. She calls me when she needs something. I remember the exact moment I understood the architecture of my family's love. I was 9 years old. It was a Tuesday in March, and my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Okafor, had selected my poem about winter birds to be read at the school's spring assembly. She called my mother personally. She said I had a remarkable gift for language. My mother said, "That's wonderful." And then she asked if the assembly would conflict with Vivienne's dance recital. It did. She chose the recital. Mrs. Okafor read my poem herself, in my absence, to a gymnasium full of parents. I sat in the 3rd row of a dance studio watching my sister perform a routine she had practiced 47 times while I counted ceiling tiles. I know it was 47 because I was the one who sat with the stopwatch every night timing her music. No one timed my poems. I am telling you this not to make you feel sorry for me. I am telling you this because for 27 years, I told myself it didn't matter, that I was being sensitive, that Vivian needed more, that I was the strong one, the capable one, the one who didn't require applause. I have a drawer in my apartment, programs from every school play, every essay contest, every award ceremony I attended alone. Next to the drawer is the box of returned birthday cards, 2 records of the same truth. I existed, I kept showing up, and I kept doing it without anyone watching. The thing nobody tells you about being the overlooked child is that it doesn't happen all at once. It is not a single dramatic wound. It is 1,000 paper cuts so small and so frequent that you begin to believe they are normal, that this is just what love feels like, that you must be asking for too much if you want more. My mother calls Vivian's house a home. She calls my apartment your little place. My father introduces Vivian's husband at family gatherings as our son. He has introduced my colleagues when they have had the misfortune of meeting him as Serena's work friends, as if I am in 7th grade and these are people I share a lunch table with. At Thanksgiving 3 years ago, my father gave a toast. He went around the table and said something meaningful about every person present. He told Carter he was the son he had always hoped for. He told Vivian she made the family complete. When he reached me, he said, "And Serena, always working hard." Then he moved on to Carter's golf handicap for 4 minutes. Always working hard, not what she works toward, not what she has built, not who she is, just always working hard, as if effort without recognition is the ceiling of what I am allowed to be. My colleagues at Westbrook think of me as the teacher who never leaves. I am there before the custodians unlock the building. I stay until the parking lot empties. I redesign my entire curriculum every summer. I write individual letters of recommendation for every student who asks, each one specific, each one true, each one rewritten until it says the thing that needs saying. Last spring, my department head, Dr. Patricia Weiss, nominated me for the Illinois Educator of the Year. I won. The Springfield ceremony, the navy dress, the empty seats. You already know how that night ended. I have a student named Marcus, 17 years old, brilliant, quiet, perpetually underestimated. His family expected him to go into finance like his uncles. He wanted to write. I spent a year helping him build a portfolio. I connected him with a summer writing program, edited his applications, and wrote a recommendation letter I rewrote 11 times because I wanted every sentence to be undeniable. He got into Columbia. His mother called me the day the acceptance came, weeping. She said, "You saw him when no one else did. You changed his life." I held it together while she cried. I said the things teachers say, that it was all him, that I just helped him see what was already there. After I hung up, I sat in my car in the school parking lot for 20 minutes because I knew exactly what it felt like to need someone to see you. And I had never once had that, not from the people who were supposed to. It started with a group text. My mother added me to a family planning thread in February, 3 months before my sister's 10th wedding anniversary. The thread was called Vivian and Carter's Celebration. 22 people, aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. My mother, my father, Vivian's mother-in-law, the family florist, apparently. I read back through the messages. They had been planning this for 6 weeks before my mother remembered to include me. My role, as outlined by my father in a message from January, was clear. Serena can handle the logistics. She is good at organizing things. Not Serena might enjoy being part of this. Not we should make sure Serena feels included. Serena can handle the logistics. I scrolled further. My mother wrote, "We are thinking $3,000 per family unit for the venue deposit. I am sure Serena can contribute more given her salary bump this year." My father responded with a single thumbs up emoji. Vivian, who was in the thread but playing no role in the planning, responded with a red heart. I want to pause and tell you about that salary bump. I received a merit raise this year, an additional $8,400 annually, which the school district awards to educators who receive state-level recognition. It took 15 years of work, 2 graduate degrees, and a state award to earn it. My mother knew about the raise because I called her, excited, on a Thursday afternoon. She listened for approximately 40 seconds before pivoting to ask whether I had received the invite for Vivian's anniversary dinner yet. She remembered the raise the moment it became useful. She did not remember to say congratulations. That night, I pulled out the shoebox. And then the drawer. 27 years of programs and certificates and invitations with my name on them and no one beside me. I spread everything across my kitchen table and sat down with a cup of tea that went cold beside me. I have kept a journal since I was 11 years old, not a diary in the romantic sense, more like a ledger, dates, events, observations. My father's teacher says you are gifted, scrawled in a margin after a parent-teacher conference he attended alone because my mother was at Vivian's recital. My 8th grade graduation, where my parents left early because Vivian had a migraine. My 16th birthday, which fell the same weekend they drove Vivian to tour her first choice college in Boston. I spent that birthday with my grandmother, who made me a lemon cake from scratch and taught me gin rummy and really asked me what I wanted to do with my life. My grandmother was the first person in my family who ever asked me what I wanted. Not what I was doing, not how I was performing, what I wanted. She died when I was 24. I gave the eulogy. My mother told me afterward it was beautiful, but a little long. Vivian cried perfectly at the funeral, which my mother mentioned twice on the drive home. I sat at that kitchen table from 9 in the evening until 2 in the morning, reading my own life back to myself. And for the first time, I didn't explain it away, didn't tell myself I was being too sensitive, too demanding, too much. I read it like evidence, because that is exactly what it was. In the weeks that followed, I organized it. I pulled everything from the drawer and the box, spread it across my kitchen table over 3 evenings, and built it into something that could be presented. I bought a leather portfolio from an office supply store on a Tuesday night and filled it methodically. Dated, annotated, printed. It took longer than I expected. It was the most deliberate thing I had ever done. I called my mother on a Sunday. This was not impulsive. I spent 2 weeks deciding. I talked to my therapist about it for 3 sessions in a row. I wrote notes, not a speech, but a map, because I knew the moment I heard her voice, every carefully constructed thought would dissolve into the familiar language of apology and accommodation I had been speaking my entire life. So I wrote it down first. And then I called. "Mom," I said, "I need to talk about the anniversary party thread." She softened her voice immediately into something gentle and braced. "Of course, sweetheart. What is on your mind?" "I cannot contribute $3,000, I said, "and I want to talk about why I was added 6 weeks after everyone else, and why Dad described my role as logistics coordinator rather than as a family member being included." She went quiet. "Serena," she said, "we added you as soon as we thought of it." "You thought of it 6 weeks in?" I said. She went quiet again. Longer this time. "We have a lot going on," she said. "You know how it is with Vivian's family." "I do know how it is with Vivian's family," I said. "I have watched how it is with Vivian's family for 36 years. This is the part where I am supposed to tell you she broke down, that she apologized, that decades of erasure were acknowledged in a single phone call. That is not what happened. What happened is my mother told me I was being hurtful, that I was making everything about myself, that Vivian's anniversary was a special occasion and this wasn't the time to raise my grievances. The word grievances landed like something clinical and slightly shameful, as if wanting to be treated equally was a condition I should manage privately, with professional help, away from people who had dinner reservations. I said, "I love you, Mom." And then I said something I had never said before in my entire life. "I am not available to help plan this party." I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I had to put the phone on the counter and stand over my kitchen sink and breathe. But I didn't call back. My father called 20 minutes later. He did not ask how I was. He did not ask what had prompted the conversation. He said, "Your mother is upset." I said, "I know." He said, "You need to apologize." I said, "I don't think I do." The silence that followed was the longest I have ever shared with my father. Longer than the silences at dinner tables, at graduation ceremonies, at holidays when I sat across from him wondering if he saw me at all. He said, "I don't understand what you want from us, Serena." And I said, clearly. I hung up a second time. I sat down on my kitchen floor. And then something happened that I had not anticipated. I didn't feel guilty. For the first time in my life, I had said the true thing, and I felt the truth of it, clean and clear and completely mine. Before I tell you about building a new life, I need to tell you about the grief, because that part never gets talked about. Everyone wants the redemption arc, the chosen family, the solo trip, the birthday surrounded by people who love you, and those things came, but first came the grief, and it was deeper than I expected, and it needed to be felt all the way through before anything else was possible. I grieved the family I was never going to have, not the family I had, the one I had always been waiting for them to become. The mother who would have called after the award ceremony, not with a photo of someone else's child, but to ask how it felt to stand at that podium. The father who would have been in that third row, who would have leaned over to the stranger beside him and said quietly, "That is my daughter up there." The sister who would have known, without being told, that I needed witnessing. I grieved all of it, systematically. The way you grieve someone who is still alive but no longer available to you in the way you needed them to be. And I want to tell you that this grief is legitimate, that it is not self-pity, that you are allowed to mourn the love you deserved and did not receive, even if the people who failed to give it are still living, still calling, still signing holiday cards with their printed names at the bottom. There is a specific loneliness that belongs only to the overlooked child. It is not the loneliness of being alone. It is the loneliness of being in the room and still not being seen. Of sitting at the dinner table and realizing that your presence has been noted but not registered. That you are furniture, functional, occasionally useful, never the thing someone rearranges their schedule for. I sat with that loneliness. I let it be as large as it actually was instead of making it smaller so it would be more comfortable for everyone else. It took about 3 months. Some weeks were harder than others. Some Tuesday evenings, I sat in my apartment and felt the specific weight of it pressing on my chest, and I simply let it press. And then, slowly, something shifted. Not because the grief disappeared, but because I had finally given it a room of its own, acknowledged it, named it, stopped pretending it was something smaller than it was. Only then did I have room to start building. I want to tell you about April Chen. April is 53, teaches AP Physics 3 doors from my classroom, has the loudest laugh in the building, and holds an extremely strong opinion about which red pen is superior for grading. Her husband David brings homemade dumplings to the faculty lounge every Friday. Her daughters call the house at unpredictable hours, and the calls are always answered. The Monday after those phone calls with my parents, April took one look at me and said, "Come to dinner Thursday." It was not a question. I went. Her house smelled like garlic and 5-spice. David poured me tea without asking. Her younger daughter, home from college, fell asleep on the couch halfway through dinner, and nobody made a fuss. April asked me about my students, my curriculum, my grandmother, the journal I had mentioned once in passing 6 months earlier that she had clearly filed away and remembered. She remembered everything I had ever said to her, every offhand thing. I drove home that night feeling something I hadn't felt in years, fed, not just literally. I began to understand in the months that followed that I had confused assignment with love. That I had assumed the people given to me by birth were the primary architects of my worth, and had spent 36 years trying to earn a promotion in a company that had already decided my ceiling. And that while I was looking in that direction, I had not fully seen the people who were already, quietly, offering me exactly what I needed. April. Dr. Weiss, who submitted my award nomination without telling me because she didn't want me to minimize my own accomplishment before the committee had a chance to see it. My neighbor, Mr. Osei, 80 years old, retired literature professor who reads every book I assign and leaves handwritten critiques in an envelope under my door. My former student, Priya, now 25, who texts me every time she finishes a novel I recommended because she wants to argue about the ending. These people had been my family for years. I had spent 36 years looking at the wrong door. My mother called in September, 2 weeks before my birthday, and asked me to come to Sunday dinner. Not Vivian's house, my parents' house. She said it would be just the 4 of us. She did not mention Vivian. I went. I brought the portfolio. Inside it was everything. Not in the drawer, not in the shoebox. Organized, dated, annotated, the 3rd grade assembly program. My poem listed without me there to read it. Mrs. Okafor's name typed beside it in parentheses as reader. My Northwestern Graduate School acceptance letter. The congratulations card my parents sent, which I have kept for 15 years because it contains no personal message whatsoever, just printed names at the bottom, Richard and Claudia Calloway, like a business correspondence, the Illinois Educator of the Year certificate, the seating program from the Springfield ceremony, my name in the program, the 2 reserved seats on either side of me listed simply as Calloway guest, a screenshot of the family group text, my father's logistics message, my mother's salary bump calculation, Vivian's red heart, the shoebox. I placed it at the center of the table. 43 returned birthday cards, still sealed, my journal entries, selected, dated, read aloud in a voice that did not shake. My father's face moved through several phases. Irritation first, then the particular defensiveness of a man who has never been asked to account for himself, then something I had never seen on him before. Discomfort without an immediate exit strategy. He said, "You are being dramatic." I opened the journal to the Thanksgiving toast entry and read it aloud, then the entry from the day of the Springfield ceremony, then the one from when I was 9, sitting in the dance studio, counting ceiling tiles. He stopped saying I was being dramatic. I pointed to the shoebox. 43 cards, I said. 15 years. You never updated my address. He looked at the box for a long time. Then, very quietly, not an apology, not absolution, but the specific sound of a man hearing himself for the first time, he said, "That was a terrible thing. The toast. That was a terrible thing to do." He did not say more. He did not apologize, but he said it. And I understood that somewhere beneath 36 years of prioritizing his son-in-law's golf handicap over his daughter's existence, he had always known, had filed it somewhere and left it there, unexamined, because examining it would have required him to be someone he hadn't learned to be yet. That was, somehow, worse than if he had simply never noticed. And also, quietly, unexpectedly, a beginning. My mother cried. This was not surprising. She has always cried when confronted with accountability. I had, for most of my life, allowed her tears to redirect the conversation, to make her the wounded one, to make me the one responsible for managing her feelings about her own behavior. Not tonight. I said, "I am not telling you this to hurt you. I am telling you this because I need you to understand what the pattern actually looks like from where I have been standing." Vivian was there. She had not been mentioned. She sat at the end of the table and did not speak for a long time. When I placed the shoebox at the center, I watched something cross her face. Not guilt, exactly. Something more complicated. The expression of someone seeing a shadow they had been casting without knowing it. Finally, she said, "I didn't know," and I believed her. That is the strange and complicated part of being the invisible sibling. The favored one often doesn't know. They are simply the sun, and sons cannot see what exists in their shadow because the shadow has always been dark. I said, "I know you didn't." She said, "I am sorry, Serena." She said my name like it mattered, not an afterthought. Not a footnote. Those 2 words, spoken plainly, cracked open something in my chest that had been sealed for a very long time. I didn't forgive everything that night. Forgiveness is not a light switch, but I left that house carrying something different than what I arrived with. The portfolio stayed on the table, the shoebox too. I left them there. Consider it required reading. I want to tell you what a year of choosing yourself actually looks like. Not a montage. Not a single transformative moment followed by sustained, effortless peace. It looks like a Tuesday where you decline an event you would have previously forced yourself through out of obligation and instead stay home and finish a novel and feel, quietly and without ceremony, completely fine. It looks like learning to sit in your own company and discovering that you are actually quite good company. It looks like answering your phone sometimes and letting it ring other times based entirely on capacity. Not guilt, not obligation, not fear of what they will say if you don't pick up. In March, Marcus had his first essay published in a national literary magazine. He mailed me a copy with a handwritten note. "You were right about the ending. Thank you for making me rewrite it 6 times. I framed it. It hangs beside the Educator of the Year certificate in my classroom, which is no longer in a drawer. In May, April and I co-submitted a curriculum proposal to the school board, an interdisciplinary literature and science elective. Approved. We spent the entire summer building it from scratch, arguing cheerfully over every unit in empty hallways over terrible vending machine coffee, laughing in a way that bounced off the lockers. In July, I went to Portugal. I had been talking about going to Portugal for 8 years. 8 years of saying someday, of waiting for the right companion, the right window, the right moment when my calendar and my courage aligned. 8 years of putting it at the bottom of a list that always had something more pressing at the top. I booked the ticket on a Wednesday evening in April, alone. 1 carry-on bag, 12 days. Lisbon in July smells like sea salt and grilled fish and something warm underneath it all that I don't have a word for in English, but that my body recognized as welcome. The streets are narrow and the tiles on the buildings are blue and white and cracked in the right places, like something that has been beautiful so long it no longer needs to try. I got lost on the first afternoon and didn't mind. I followed a sound of fado music into a courtyard I would never have found on a tour. I sat on a stone step and listened until the music ended, and the woman singing looked up and found my face in the small crowd and nodded once, as if she had expected me. I ate dinner alone every night at small tables on the kind of streets where the chairs are mismatched and the wine is whatever the owner recommends. I ordered by pointing. I learned to say obrigada and said it constantly. On the fourth night, the restaurateur at a tiny place near the Alfama brought me dessert I hadn't ordered, a small pastel de nata, still warm, and said in careful English, "You look like someone who needed something sweet today." I did not know how he knew. I thanked him and ate it slowly and cried a little, quietly, in the way you can only cry when you are somewhere no one knows your name and there is no one to perform composure for. I took 800 photographs. I have used 40 as writing prompts for my students. On the last night, I sat on a rooftop terrace and watched the sun go down over the Tagus River and felt something I can only describe as the specific pleasure of belonging entirely to yourself. Not loneliness, not freedom exactly, something more precise than both. The feeling of being in the exact right place because you chose it, alone, without consulting anyone, without waiting for permission. I had spent 36 years waiting to be chosen. In Lisbon, I finally understood that choosing yourself is not a consolation prize. It is the whole point. In September, I turned 37. April organized a birthday gathering without telling me, the kind of audacious, loving thing she does, and I arrived home to 12 people in my living room who had not been there when I left. People who showed up not because we shared blood, but because we had chosen each other deliberately over time in the specific way that chosen family is chosen, slowly through accumulated proof. Mr. Osei brought me a first edition of a novel I had mentioned wanting once 2 years ago. He had written a note in the inside cover, 3 sentences about why the book mattered. He had read it first. Dr. Weiss brought champagne and a card signed by the entire English department, each person having written 1 sentence. 14 sentences. I read all of them twice. Priya flew in from New York. She arrived 40 minutes late and slightly breathless and announced her train had been delayed and she had run the last 6 blocks and she was not going to miss this for anything in the world. I stood in the middle of my apartment surrounded by all of these people and felt something I want to name correctly. It was not happiness exactly, though it was that too. It was recognition. The feeling of being in a room full of people who know your name the way it is meant to be known, not as a function, not as a resource, not as an afterthought, just as you. My mother called that evening. I let it ring twice and picked up. "Happy birthday, Serena," she said. She sounded tentative, like someone learning to knock before entering a room they used to walk into without thinking. "Thank you, Mom," I said. We talked for 7 minutes. She asked about Portugal. She asked about my students. She did not ask about money or family events or logistics. Before she hung up, she said, "I have been thinking about what you brought to dinner, about the assembly. When you were 9, I waited. I should have been there," she said. "I am sorry I wasn't. It was not everything, not a full accounting, not the complete acknowledgement of 27 years of pattern, but it was true, and it was hers, and she had not been prompted." I said, "Thank you, Mom. I mean that." And I did. I tell my students at the beginning of every school year that the most important skill a reader can develop is the ability to question the narrator. Not because narrators lie, but because every narrator has a limited perspective. Every narrator sees the story from inside their own particular window, and the light is always slightly different depending on where you are standing. I spent 36 years being the narrator of a story in which the central conflict was my inadequacy, in which the reason I was overlooked was something inherent to me, something I could fix if I just worked harder, achieved more, asked for less, took up less space, made myself easier to love. When I finally read my own story as evidence rather than autobiography, I found a different narrator. One who had been doing extraordinary things in rooms where nobody was watching. One who had kept going in the absence of applause. One who had, without fully realizing it, become exactly the kind of person she had always needed someone to be for her. I am not going to tell you everything is resolved. My father is not there yet. Maybe he won't be. I have made a kind of peace with that uncertainty that I could not have accessed a year ago. My mother asks questions she didn't used to ask. Vivian and I have had 3 long phone calls in the past year, and I have discovered she is funnier and more uncertain than she appeared from the shadow. We are learning each other slowly, without the performance our family required. My therapist calls this kind of shift a reorientation. I call it finally facing the right direction. The point is, I stopped waiting. The point is, I found the Educator of the Year certificate in the drawer with the programs and the journals, and instead of leaving it there, unwitnessed, in the dark, I had it framed and hung it in my classroom where my students can see it every day. One of them asked me about it last week. A quiet girl named Sophie sits in the 3rd row, writes poems in the margins of her notebook when she thinks I am not looking. I told her I want it for teaching, for really seeing my students, for believing that what happens in a classroom matters. She looked at it for a moment and said, "Who saw you?" I thought about Mrs. Okafor reading my poem about winter birds to a gymnasium full of parents while I sat in a dance studio counting tiles on the ceiling. I thought about my grandmother making me a lemon cake on my 16th birthday and asking me what I wanted like it was the most natural question in the world. I thought about April saying, "Come to dinner Thursday," like it was the simplest and most obvious thing. I thought about a restaurateur in Lisbon who brought me a warm pastel de nata I hadn't ordered because he could see, somehow, that I needed something sweet. I thought about myself at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, surrounded by 43 returned birthday cards and 27 years of journals, finally reading my own story as if it mattered. I said, "I learned to see myself." Sophie nodded slowly, the way students do when they write something down in their heads. I hope she keeps that. I hope she doesn't wait 36 years. I hope you don't either. The opposite of invisibility is not fame, it is witness. Being truly seen, once, fully, by someone who sees you clearly and without agenda. For so long, I looked for that witness in the faces of people who were too busy looking elsewhere. What I know now, on the other side of the hardest year of my life, is that you can be that witness for yourself. You can gather the evidence, read it back, say, "This person existed. This person worked and loved and ached and kept going in rooms where nobody was watching. And that matters, and it counts, and it is more than enough." You can say, "I see you," and mean yourself, and have it be enough. What was the moment you finally stopped waiting for someone else to see your worth and started seeing it yourself? Leave it in the comments. I read every single one. If this video gave you something today, a word for something you could not name, a permission you were waiting for, or simply the feeling that someone finally understood, please take 3 seconds and hit the like button. It costs you nothing, but it tells me that this kind of story matters, and it helps this video reach the next person who needs it tonight. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. You know exactly who that person is. The friend who never talks about her family, but you can see it in her eyes. The sister who is always the one holding everything together while everyone else gets celebrated. Send it to them. No explanation needed. They will understand the moment it starts. And if you want more stories like this one, stories about choosing yourself, drawing boundaries, building a life that belongs entirely to you, subscribe and turn on notifications. I make this kind of content because I believe these stories matter, because the quiet ones deserve a voice, because the overlooked ones deserve to be found. I will see you in the next one. Until then, witness yourself. You are worth that.